Spanish, also called Castilian, is a Romance language that originated in the Castile region of Spain and today has hundreds of millions of native speakers across the world. Spanish is a part of the Ibero-Romance group of languages, which evolved from several dialects of Common Latin in Iberia after the collapse of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century. It was first documented in central northern Iberia in the 9th century and gradually spread with the expansion of the Kingdom of Castile into central and southern Iberia. Beginning in the early 16th century, Spanish was taken to the colonies of the Spanish Empire, most notably to the Americas, as well as territories in Africa, Oceania and the Philippines. From its beginnings, Spanish vocabulary was influenced by its contact with Basque, as well as by neighboring Ibero-Romance languages, and later it absorbed many Arabic words during the Al-Andalus era in the Iberian Peninsula. It also adopted words from non-Iberian languages, particularly the Romance languages Occitan, French, Italian and Sardinian, as well as from Nahuatl and other indigenous languages of the Americas. Spanish is one of the 6 official languages of the United Nations, and it is used as an official language by the European Union, the Organization of American States, and the Union of South American Nations, among many other international organizations. Estimated number of speakers. It is estimated that more than 400 million people speak Spanish as a native language, which qualifies it as second on the lists of languages by number of native speakers. There are an estimated 470 million Spanish speakers with native competence and 559 million Spanish speakers as a first or second language, including speakers with limited competence and more than 21 million students of Spanish as a foreign language. It is the third language by total speakers behind Mandarin and English. Spanish is the official or national language in Spain, Equatorial Guinea, and 19 countries in the Americas. Speakers in the Western Hemisphere total some 418 million. In the European Union, Spanish is the mother tongue of 8% of the population, with an additional 7% speaking it as a second language. Spanish is the most popular second language learned in the United States. In 2011 it was estimated by the American Community Survey that of the 55 million Hispanic United States residents who are 5 years of age and over, 38 million speak Spanish at home. Names of the language. In Spain and in some other parts of the Spanish-speaking world, Spanish is called Castellano as well as Español, the language of the region of Castile, contrasting it with other languages spoken in Spain such as Galician, Basque and Catalan. The Spanish Constitution of 1978 uses the term Castellano to define the official language of the whole Spanish state in contrast to las demás lenguas, españolas. Article 3 reads as follows. El castellano es la lengua española oficial del Estado. Las demás lenguas españolas serán también oficiales en las respectivas comunidades autónomas. Castilian is the official Spanish language of the state. The other Spanish languages as well shall be official in their respective autonomous communities. The Spanish Royal Academy, on the other hand, currently uses the term Español in its publications but from 1713 to 1923 called the language Castellano. The Diccionario Pan-Hispánico de Dudas states that although the Spanish Royal Academy prefers to use the term Español in its publications when referring to the Spanish language, both terms, Español and Castellano, are regarded as synonymous and equally valid. 2 etymologies for Español have been suggested. The Spanish Royal Academy Dictionary derives the term from the Provençal word español, and that in turn from the medieval Latin word Hispanolis, from, or pertaining to, Hispania. Other authorities attribute it to a supposed medieval Latin *Hispanian, with the same meaning. History. The Spanish language evolved from Vulgar Latin, which was brought to the Iberian Peninsula by the Romans during the Second Punic War. Beginning in 210 BC, Previously, several pre-Roman languages, unrelated to Latin, and some of them unrelated even to Indo-European, were spoken in the Iberian Peninsula. These languages included Basque, Iberian, Celtiberian and Celtic. Traces of Basque especially can be found in the Spanish vocabulary today, mainly in place names. The first documents to record what is today regarded as the precursor of modern Spanish are from the 9th century. Throughout the Middle Ages and into the modern era, the most important influences on the Spanish lexicon came from neighboring Romance languages: Navarro-Aragonese, Leonese, Aragonese, Catalan, Portuguese, Galician, Mirandese, Occitan, Gascon, and later, French and Italian. Spanish also borrowed vocabulary from Basque and Arabic, as well as from Germanic languages through the migration of tribes and a period of Visigoth rule in Iberia. In addition, many words were borrowed from Latin through the influence of written language and the liturgical language of the Church. Local sociolects of Vulgar Latin evolved into Spanish in the north of Iberia, in an area defined by Álava, Cantabria, Burgos, Soria and La Rioja. The dialect was later brought to the city of Toledo, where the written standard of Spanish was first developed, in the 13th century. In this formative stage, Spanish developed a strongly differing variant from its close cousin, Leonese, and, according to some authors, was distinguished by a heavy Basque influence. This distinctive dialect progressively spread south with the advance of the Reconquista, and so gathered a sizable lexical influence from the Arabic of Al-Andalus, much of it indirectly, through the Romance Mozarabic dialects. The written standard for this new language began to be developed in the cities of Toledo, in the 13th to 16th centuries, and Madrid, from the 1570s. The development of the Spanish sound system from that of Vulgar Latin exhibits most of the changes that are typical of Western Romance languages, including lenition of intervocalar consonants. The diphthongization of Latin stressed short t and o, which occurred in open syllables in French and Italian, but not at all in Catalan or Portuguese, is found in both open and closed syllables in Spanish, as shown in the following table. Spanish is marked by the palatalization of the Latin double consonants nn and ul. The consonant written u or v in Latin and pronounced w in Classical Latin had probably fortified to a bilabial fricative beta in Vulgar Latin. In early Spanish it merged with the consonant written b. In modern Spanish, there is no difference between the pronunciation of orthographic b and v, with some exceptions in Caribbean Spanish. Peculiar to Spanish was the mutation of Latin initial f into h whenever it was followed by a vowel that did not diphthongize. The h, still preserved in spelling, is now silent in most varieties of the language, although in some Andalusian and Caribbean dialects it is still aspirated in some words. Because of borrowings from Latin and from neighboring Romance languages, there are many f-h doublets in modern Spanish. Fernando and Hernando, Ferrero and Herrero, Fierro and Hierro, and Fondo and Hondo. Hacer is the root word of satisfacer, and hecho is the root word of satisfeco. Compare the examples in the following table. Some consonant clusters of Latin also produced characteristically different results in these languages, as shown in the examples in the following table. In the 15th and 16th centuries, Spanish underwent a dramatic change in the pronunciation of its sibilant consonants, known in Spanish as the readjusted a las sibilantes, which resulted in the distinctive vela x pronunciation of the letter J and, in a large part of Spain, the characteristic interdental theta for the letter Z. See History of Spanish for details. The Gramática de la Lengua Castellana, written in Salamanca in 1492 by Elio Antonio de Nebria, was the first grammar written for a modern European language. According to a popular anecdote, when Nebria presented it to Queen Isabella I, She asked him what was the use of such a work, and he answered that language is the instrument of empire. In his introduction to the grammar, dated August 18, 1492, Nebria wrote that language was always the companion of empire. From the 16th century onwards, the language was taken to America and the Spanish East Indies via Spanish colonization of America. Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra, author of Don Quixote, is such a well-known reference in the world that Spanish is often called La Lengua de Cervantes. In the 20th century, Spanish was introduced to Equatorial Guinea and the Western Sahara, and to areas of the United States that had not been part of the Spanish Empire, such as Spanish Harlem in New York City. For details on borrowed words and other external influences upon Spanish, see Influences on the Spanish language. Grammar. Spanish is a relatively inflected language, with a two-gender noun system and about 50 conjugated forms per verb, but with inflection of nouns, adjectives, and determiners limited to number and gender. Spanish syntax is considered right-branching, meaning that subordinate or modifying constituents tend to be placed after their head words. The language uses prepositions, and usually, though not always, places adjectives after nouns, as do most other Romance languages. Its sentence structure is generally subject-verb-object, although variations are common. It is a pro-drop, or null subject, language, that is, it allows the deletion of subject pronouns when they are pragmatically unnecessary. Spanish is described as a verb-framed language, meaning that the direction of motion is expressed in the verb while the mode of locomotion is expressed adverbially. Subject, verb inversion is not required in questions, and thus the recognition of declarative or interrogative may depend entirely on intonation. Phonology. Segmental phonology. The Spanish phonemic inventory consists of 5 vowel phonemes and 17 to 19 consonant phonemes. The main allophonic variation among vowels is the reduction of the high vowels I and U to glides J and W, respectively, when unstressed and adjacent to another vowel. Some instances of the mid-vowels E and O, determined lexically, alternate with the diphthongs J and W, respectively, when stressed, in a process that is better described as morphophonemic rather than phonological, as it is not predictable from phonology alone. The Spanish consonant system is characterized by 3 nasal phonemes, and 1 or 2 lateral phoneme, which in syllable final position lose their contrast and are subject to assimilation to a following consonant, 3 voiceless stops and the affricate T, 3 or 4 voiceless fricatives, a set of voiced obstruents B, D, and sometimes J, which alternate between approximant and plosive allophones depending on the environment, and a phonemic distinction between the tapped and trilled R sounds. In the following table of consonant phonemes, theta and are marked with an asterisk to indicate that they are preserved only in some dialects. In most dialects they have been merged, respectively, with per second and j, in the mergers called, respectively, cessio and hierismo. The phoneme is in parentheses and fricative. The voiced ones alternate allophonically between plosive and approximant pronunciations. Prosody Spanish is classified by its rhythm as a syllable-timed language, meaning that each syllable has approximately the same duration regardless of stress. Spanish intonation varies significantly according to dialect, but generally conforms to a pattern of falling tone for declarative sentences and WH questions, and rising tone for yes, no questions. There are no syntactic markers to distinguish between questions and statements, and thus the recognition of declarative or interrogative depends entirely on intonation. Stress most often occurs on any of the last 3 syllables of a word, with some rare exceptions at the 4th last or earlier syllables. The tendencies of stress assignment are as follows. In words that end with a vowel, stress most often falls on the penultimate syllable. In words that end with a consonant, stress most often falls on the last syllable, with the following exceptions. The grammatical endings n and s do not change the location of stress. Thus regular verbs ending with n and the great majority of words ending with s are stressed on the penult. Although a significant number of nouns and adjectives ending with n are also stressed on the penult. The great majority of nouns and adjectives ending with n are stressed on their last syllable. Pre-antepenultimate stress occurs rarely, and only on verbs with clitic pronouns attached. In addition to the many exceptions to these tendencies, there are numerous minimal pairs which contrast solely on stress, such as sabana and sabana, as well as limite, limite and limite, or also liquido, liquido and liquido. The spelling system unambiguously reflects where the stress occurs. In the absence of an accent mark, the stress falls on the last syllable unless the last letter is n, s, or a vowel, in which cases the stress falls on the next to last syllable, if and only if the absence of an accent mark would give the wrong stress information. An acute accent mark appears over the stressed syllable.